Good night, and welcome to another edition of the Marcia Week Show. My name is Janine, and I do apologize about the late start. We were having some very technical issues tonight. Our co-host would be myself and Shaquani, and we want to thank you for being so patient with us. It's good to see that you guys have been waiting and ready for this youth edition of the Marcia Week Show. We're going to be having a new guest on tonight, and we want to welcome him with open arms as you do everyone else. We're going to be having Dr.Nathan Wangusi as well. He's going to be tuning in from Kenya in regards to the abduction that is happening over there with the protesters. We're also be having Don Leacock later on, and he's going to be talking about what happened in 2024 from the youth perspective and what went wrong. So, we do want to thank you for being patient, and we do apologize about what was happening earlier. However, Marcy, as you know, Marcy is in Kenya, and she would have shown you a clip of what she was doing previously. So you can join tomorrow. Yesterday, sorry, it was on yesterday's edition, and she was able to showcase what she was doing. So we do look forward to what else Marcy has to showcase for us later on. Shaquani will be joining me shortly as well. So tonight I asked you guys to give everyone a warm welcome, and I hope that your Friday is going pretty good as we are in the 17th day of 2024. In a few seconds, I'm going to go ahead and play the national anthem.
Hi, good night, everyone. I just want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. Again, we would like to apologize for the technical difficulties that we had in the beginning tonight. I don't know what happened. We don't know what happened. We were on talking to you, but then we got some calls from people telling us that they can't see us. And then we realized that we were saying no people, no comments, nothing like that. So I am so glad that we can finally see and hear messages from everyone tonight. We do truly appreciate you joining us. Even though we have a late start tonight, we have a really good show in store. So tonight, our first guest is a young man, and I want you to give him the warmest, best comments coming, because I want to say applause, but it's hard to applaud online. His name is Stefan Watson, and he will be talking about debt management and how you can handle your debt. Okay, Stefan, I'm going to bring you in to stage now.
Hi, good night, Shaquani.
Hi, good night, Stefan. So you could just
Night.
let us know when you're ready. You ready to bring
Right,
out your
please.
slide?
Yeah, sure. Let me share it now. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so before Stefan starts, I just want to let everyone know that Stefan Watson has worked at the credit union for over 10 years with various roles, including disbursement officer and credit underwriter. He's currently a practicing business analysis sorry, as well.
Okay, thanks, Janine, and good night, everyone. Thanks for welcoming me onto the show to present tonight. Right, so I don't have to go over what Janine said. I have worked at the credit union, a large financial institution in Barbados, for just over 10 years. Worked in various roles in the company. So right now, I'm going to present to you on debt management and how that impacts you. Some of the things I'm going to go into tonight are some definitions that cover credit, debt, and interest. I'm going to go through some of the types of credit and the ways that we categorize credit. I'm also going to give you some examples of the cost of debt. I'm going to do some dives into the typical and prevailing credit myths and mistakes that people make when it comes to credit. Also, I'm going to highlight some of the indicators of bad credit. These are some of the things that a lender will look at and say this person is high risk. This person is not someone I would likely lend my money to. Lastly, I'm going to give you some ways in which people manage debt and give you some key takeaways that you can leave the presentation with. Right. So credit, debt, interest. What are these things really to the individual? Credit is an agreement to receive cash, goods, or services now and pay for them in the future. So you could have a need or a want right now. There's something that you may want to purchase, and you might want to travel, you might have a medical emergency, you might want to buy a car, buy a house. You may not have those funds now, or you may have those funds but not want to use your own funds to make the purchase. Credit now is the agreement between you as the borrower and the lender that you will use their funds to access the good or the service that you want. Debt now is under that agreement what you owe the lender. So that would be the balance that you owe. That would be the funds that you have to repay to the person who lent the funds to you. Now, if I'm a lender and if I'm lending my funds out to an individual, I am taking on the risk for you. I am using the funds that I saved up, the funds that I earned, and I'm giving them to you for you to use for whatever purpose that you have come up with for using these funds. However, the risk is really at me now because I now have to hope that you're going to repay the loan. I have to hope that you're going to honor it. I have to hope that whatever you're investing your funds in are going to bring a return for you that you're able to make me whole. So for me to cover and mitigate for that risk, I have to charge you interest. I have to charge you something that covers the risk I'm taking and also makes it worth my while. So that's what interest really is the charge that the lender will set for a borrower for using the funds. And APR note is a type of interest rate that you normally see in the credit card industry, the annual percentage rate, and that is the yearly cost of debt over the entire loan term. So things like credit and debt, they're very big business, not just in Barbados, not just in our financial market, but all around the world. So at the macro level, that's with companies and corporations. You can see the IMF, the World Bank, and some exim banks dealing in multi-million-dollar transactions, sometimes billion-dollar transactions, lending funds to both companies and countries. And at the micro level, we as citizens engage with banks, credit unions, credit card issuers, and payday lenders as well. Some of the reasons for debt, the reasons that persons really go into debt, are that you have a current need or desire. You currently either can't afford it or you prefer not to use your own funds to make the purchase. So you want to travel, you have a medical emergency, you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, there's a household appliance you want to purchase. You either can't, you don't have all the funds for that right now, or you prefer not to use your funds for it. So you go to a lender, you go to an institution that's going to lend you the funds, take on that risk for you. But again, they have to get something in return for this activity, so they charge you an interest. Those are the key elements of credit, essentially. So when it comes to credit, there's so many different ways in which it could be categorized. But for regulatory reasons and for ease of reference, basically so we can understand the type of agreements that persons go through. One of the ways in which we categorize credit is we say that credit is either secured or unsecured. Now, a secured credit could be is when you have a loan or a debt that could be discharged, and discharge means that when the borrower becomes bankrupt or is unable to repay the loan, that there's an asset that could be repossessed, and it could be used to repay the debt or to clear the debt for the borrower. So examples of a secured debt would be your vehicle, your house, your land. So you will see with a vehicle loan, a mortgage, a land loan, if the individual is not able to repay the loan at any given point, your agreement would have had clauses in place where that property could be repossessed and used to pay the debt, to pay off the debt. A loan like that usually carries a longer loan term and lower interest rate. And the reason for that is a secured loan comes with less risk to the lender, because there's something that they could go for. There's something that they could get a bailiff to go for, go do legal action to collect the property. So the second thing is unsecured. Another way that you categorize that is say that the debt is unsecured. That's debt that can't be discharged. So it doesn't have any asset that you can go for. That could be your usual monthly bills, your electricity, water bills, light bills, sorry, and your telephone bill, sorry, your personal loans, lines of credit, etc. These loans carry a shorter loan term, if they do have a loan term at all, and they tend to have a higher interest rate. Again, this higher interest rate is going to be because there is a higher risk to the person lending the funds, that thereby they have to come up with a way then to cover the risk that they're undertaking. And another way that we categorize that, we say that is either, or credit, sorry, we say that credit is either open-ended or closed-ended. Now, an open-ended form of credit is when you have an open-ended form of credit, sorry, is when you have a debt or a credit arrangement where there is no maturity date for the loan. There is no date where you as the borrower and the lender have decided or agreed that the loan is going to be paid off and the debt is going to be squashed by a certain period. So those types of open-ended credit agreements cover short-term loans. So it covers like your utility bills. It covers, sorry, not short-term loans, but covers your utility bills. It covers telephone bills, etc. It also could be something revolving. So revolving could mean that again there is no cutoff. So as you pay back for the also means that as you pay back for the debt, that the overall balance available to the individual replenishes in a sense. So you see that with credit cards and lines of credit. You could be issued a credit card for $2,000. You use the 2,000 over the term you repay. If you look back at your card or your credit card account, you can see that you have $2,000 available again to you because it's revolving. You have repaid it. So what you've repaid minus the interest and minus whatever fees is now available again to you. Another way that loans are categorized is that you can say that loans are closed-ended. That has a clear maturity date. Those loans could either be short-term loans or they could be long-term. So the short-term loans that we would know would be like our consumer personal loans. Those tend not to go more than 5 to 7 years. You have your vehicle loans, which could range from a 5 year loan to a 10 year loan based on the age of the vehicle. Your student loans, and then you have your land loans, your mortgages, which could be sometimes 20, 20, 35, sometimes 40 years, depending on the lender and your age and the credit arrangement that they come up with for you. Now, that comes with a cost. As I explained before, there are certain ways in which the lender could not just cover the risk they're undertaking, but make some cash off of the deal. And one of the ways in which you can see that that really comes with a cost is through a hire purchase agreement. So a hire purchase agreement is one in which the individual tries to buy a good. Tends to be expensive, but they buy it in installments or they pay for it in installments. And the overall cost for that arrangement tends to be much higher than the sale price. And you can see that this type of arrangement tends to come with so many financial benefits to a company that many companies go into this business. A company that normally brings in products, they put on their own markup, and they get a profit from that. They realize that if I take that same good and I sell it over, or I sell it to the person in a hire purchase arrangement, I could be making significantly more money over time, and that is now an additional revenue source for the company. So there are many department stores that do this, that have these type of arrangements. So what I did, I went on a very popular department store's website and I looked at four goods that they have on sale. So they had a queen size mattress, a fridge, a 55-inch smart TV, and they had a 6 burner gas stove. So I could look at the queen size mattress and the fridge just to give you two quick examples. The queen size mattress, they had a sales price of $1,000. But if you don't have the 1,000 on hand, or you don't want to pay the full amount, you could pay a weekly hire purchase price of $8.92. It seems fairly cheap, seems fairly affordable. And they're also going to give you 3 years to repay. So for 3 years, every week, you're making this payment. It doesn't seem like a lot. However, when you look at the overall amount that you're paying $1,392 and 52, sorry, $1,391.52. That is a markup of $391. In other words, that's 39% of the sale price. This company is gonna get a 39% profit, or see a 39% markup on what they're selling you if you bought at the regular sale price, which already has its own markups to meet whatever revenue targets that the company has. So you can see that there is a benefit for these companies when they go into some of these credit agreements. There are opportunities for them to make a sizable chunk of money. Now I'm going to go into some of the common myths that surround credit. You hear persons talk about these things in rum shops. You hear them talk about them in the waiting lines of any institution. Persons tend to have a bit of there are some misconceptions. There are misconceptions surrounding risk, surrounding credit, and but they're so widespread. We have to start tackling them and understanding why people believe them as well. So one of the myths that persons have surrounding credit is once they pay off their loans, their credit rating would automatically improve. That's not the case. Debt and the types of debt you had, the types of credit you had, remain on your credit history, whether that be a current loan or a closed off loan. Your credit history will show the loans you had previously. It's going to show the loans you have now. It's going to show you if you ever had periods of delinquency, that is periods in which you didn't pay the loan as you agreed to on time, or you didn't pay the full minimum amount. So these things, not that they chase you, but they remain on your credit report because any other prospective lender has to understand what type of credit 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 pair you are, what type of borrower you may be. So when they undertake another loan with you, they have to see if you're somebody who's going to be a high risk or a low risk person. Another myth is that persons who go into debt on joint accounts or loans that they co-sign for, they don't believe that if they made the purchase themselves or they didn't get the money, they think that they don't have any responsibility for that loan. And that is not true either. If you were used as a co-signer, if you were on a joint account for a loan, you tend to be on a joint account for a loan or a co-signer for a reason. You had a higher level of income or you had additional income that could support the person's um, opportunity to get the loan. Your age, maybe sometimes you see persons when they go for mortgages, they might go with someone who's relatively young because that person who's young could allow them sometimes to get a higher or longer repayment period. And with the longer repayment period, you may be able to lend them a little more money. So these things, because they benefit you on the front end, they also can cost you on the back end. So don't think that just because you assisted someone and you didn't get the funds, you weren't able to access them, or the purchase was something that went entirely to them, that you will not be indebted as well. Your name is on the document, signatures on the document is there for a reason. One other myth that we find that comes up around credit is people tend to say, "My credit is what really got me in trouble. Credit is what got me in a bad state." That in and of itself is not true. Credit is not what has you in a bad state. Overspending tends to be the reason persons are in bad state. Spending what they don't have, what they can't afford, putting themselves in position where they feel that credit is more of a need than it really is a want in certain circumstances. So I think we have to look at the circumstances and the choices that people make, circumstances that people are surrounded by, and the choices and not credit itself. For example, there might be a need for you to get a loan because you have health issues. Might be a need for you to get a loan because you may need to travel. Or there may be a want for you to get a loan because you want to travel. Or there may be a want to get a loan because you want to drive a different type of vehicle. You want to live in a different type of house. You have to start weighing these differences between wants and needs to see where you really fall, what area in which you really fall in, or the certain situation falls in. For example, you could have a $10,000 loan in and of itself may not be bad because you may get that $10,000 and invest in something that can recoup money for you. It might be the seed capital for you to start your own small business that could feed you, feed your friends, feed your family, start a generational business. However, that $10,000 is something that could be directed towards travel. You go to Disney World, you have a wonderful time, make lovely memories. But at the end of the day, that $10,000 does nothing for you next year, next month. It's not going to be something that could employ family members, friends, people in your neighborhood. So you have to start weighing these two different things to see the difference between your wants, your needs, overspending, and being within your budget. So there are some common credit mistakes that persons make. Persons tend to fall within these habits because if you don't manage or monitor the things that you do, you tend to fall within certain debt traps and certain credit traps. One of the things that you see persons do sometimes is they overspend. They borrow more than they need. They spend money that they don't have or can't afford. So you might need a mortgage to build a house or to buy a house. However, you could afford a house with a pool. You don't need the pool. You don't need the gazebo. You don't need whatever other enhancement that could come with the property. You don't need it, but you want it. It's gonna look good. It's gonna make you feel a little happier. So the mortgage that you go for, let's say you could have gone for a mortgage of 300,000. You decided I can afford or I can qualify for 400 or for 450,000. Let me go for that. You've now put yourself in a deeper level of debt for something you may not need at the moment and something that you still have to repay even after the initial effect of being happy with it has worn off. Because these things tend to keep your balances high and to keep your balances harder to clear. So you have to be very cautious in how you get engaged with these things. Another common mistake that people make when it comes to credit is just pay the minimum payment. So every credit agreement tells you how much you have to pay. when you have to pay, when they expect you. If it's a closed-ended loan, it tells you when they expect the loan to be paid off, how many payment periods at a minimum they expect period overall. So if you got a loan and the loan says you could pay a minimum of $200 every month, and you decide to pay the $200, you are guaranteed to pay that loan straight down to the end date that you've agreed to. However, if you have this loan and you've decided the minimum payment is $200, but it could really afford $350, invest that $350 or that additional $150 into your loan earlier. You can find yourself paying off your loan well before the maturity date, and the overall amount of interest that the lender was about to gain off of this arrangement is going to be less. If you pay more than you have to, pay earlier, commit to it, and you still give yourself some wiggle room or leeway for if there's an incidental that pops up, you can go back to paying your minimum payment. But the faster you pay comes with paying more than the minimum payment. And another common credit mistake, and this might be one of the most common mistakes people make, is not researching. Now, people shop around when it comes to relationships. People shop around when it comes to most um, most purchases that they want to make. You will see many mothers, many parents, they shop around when it's time to buy groceries. They want to get the best deal. Don't be afraid to try to get the best deal when it comes to debt as well. There are a lot of lenders in the local industry and regionally and internationally. They want to get your business, especially if you're somebody who's going to be a low risk borrower. They need your business. They want to get persons who are likely to pay, likely to borrow a lot. They want to get these people on their books. So in cases like that, don't be afraid to look around to see what options this person has compared to the next. Somebody might have a lower interest rate. Somebody might be able to give you a lower term. They might be able to allow you convenience when it comes to going into lines. They might offer you convenience when it comes to banking. There's so many different ways in which they could try to solicit your business. You see it a lot when it comes to vehicle loans and mortgages. Banks locally tend to compete against each other in certain periods of the year. A bank might turn around and say, well, okay, um, I want your mortgage. I see your mortgage here at the credit union. I see your mortgage here at this bank, the next bank. I want it on my books. So what I'm going to offer you, I'm going to waive the legal fees. Um, any taxes that you have to pay for this period, I'm going to write them off. There's certain things that banks are going to put themselves in a position to do, or institutions are going to put themselves in a position to do to get your business. Sometimes they try to match your interest rate, the one you have now, or they try to better it. They try to say, okay, you're paying 4% somewhere else. I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to give you 3.5, something to entice you to get you to come over. So it's very important not to make these common mistakes. Right. So there are some indicators of bad credit that a lender would look at to say, well, this person is going to be high risk. This is somebody that you have to be very cautious of when it comes to lending them funds. One of the indicators is if you have maxed out credit cards and maxed out lines of credit. You're telling the lender that you have a problem when it comes to spending. You tend to spend way more than you can afford, probably way more than you need. Another indicator of bad credit is when you use one card to pay another. Using one card to pay another is not clearing debt, it's not reducing debt, it's just transferring it. You owe this amount, you went from here to here. It's not going down, it's the same level. You have the same amount of debt, it's just that you've moved it from one institution to another. So you're able to sleep one extra night. You're not paying it off, you're not clearing it, you're not reducing your indebtedness overall. Another indicator of bad credit is frequent cash advances. So when you make cash advances, especially from a credit card, it tends to come with a higher cost than if you just use the credit card to make the purchase that you wanted to make. So lenders look at that to say, okay, this person most likely doesn't have a clear cash flow. They don't have a clear cash flow that they could bank on, that they could utilize to make their usual purchases, to get through month by month, day by day. So there's somebody they should watch carefully. And another indicator of bad credit is very similar to using one card to pay another. It's when you borrow from one person to repay another debt. Again, you have not reduced your debt, you've transferred your debt. You owe $10,000 to person A or institution A, but now you split that up between your father, your mother, your uncle, your sister. When done, you still owe $10,000, but just to different persons or to one person, depending on who you borrowed the funds from. Nothing has really changed other than the the identity of the lender. Now we've gone through different ways that loans and credit could be categorized. We've gone through ways in which people could find themselves as being high risk, ways in which ways in which credit and debt could really bring in a lot of revenue and income for our companies. But now I'm going to give an example of a way that debt could really be managed. I'm going to go through this first strategy, sorry, is the power pay strategy. Now, this is a strategy in which you pay off your highest interest debt. And then after that, you divert the payments that you were paying to that highest interest debt towards the debt with the next highest interest, and then so on and so forth. Now, it is something that reduces the overall debt cost and shortens the loan term. It's not something that's going to fix your situation overnight, but if you're consistent with it, loans that were supposed to pay off in maybe 5 years, you may be able to pay them in 4, or 20 years, you may be able to pay them in 15. It depends on how committed you are and how you manage the situation. It is not something that's going to tie you down and put you in a position where you can't make ends meet month to month. So it's something you have to manage. Although you're being disciplined with it, you have to be practical and sensible with it. So in this example that I've given, this individual has a credit card with a $500 balance. They have to pay $50 minimum every month. They have a personal loan of $1,000. They have to pay $100 to the loan every month. And lastly, off and on, they have to go to the doctor. When they go to the doctor, they pay $100. So that 50 to the credit card, 100 to the personal loan, and 100 to the doctor is $250 maximum that they can allot to their expenses every month or their liabilities every month. So you see that in January and February, this person has paid the minimum they had to pay. That's $50 each month of January and February to the credit card, $100 for both months to the personal loan, and they paid $100 each month to the doctor. Now, in March, you no longer have to go to the doctor. So that $100 now is now free. You budgeted for it. However, you don't have to pay it this month. Now, there are a lot of things you could do with it. You could save it. You could spend it. You can make sure you can enjoy that month. You could treat yourself, or you could decide I'm going to use the power pay strategy to get rid of some of this debt I have. So you look at the debt that you have on your books and you look for the debt with the highest interest rate, right? That has the highest cost to you. That tends to be the credit card. Credit card interest rates tend to run well above 20%. A personal loan could be between 10 to 15, depending on the lender and depending on your risk profile as well. So when you look at your debt, you see that you have a credit card with right now it has a $400 balance because you paid 50 each month in January and February, but you know it normally carries the highest interest rate. I want to get rid of this fastest. I want to get rid of this as a priority. So I take my 100 and I pay towards the credit card in March. I pay in April. So in May now, I only have $100 to repay. And I pay that off, and I now have $50 free because, as I mentioned before, it's $250 that you would allot to your expenses every month. After I pay the 100 to the credit card, I don't have to go to the doctor, so I have $150 free. Instead of paying the usual $100 to the personal loan, I up that payment now because that's the next highest debt, or the debt with the next highest interest. So I could look directly at your personal loan. I could say pay the $50 there. And then in June, I don't have the credit card anymore. I don't have to go to the doctor either. I could pay the full $250 to the loan, dropping the balance down to $200. In July, I have to go to the doctor again. So you see, this strategy accounts for incidentals. It accounts for the standard incidentals that you know most likely will come up. Not exactly sure when, but you have to still account for these things like going to the doctor. So I know that in July I have to go to the doctor. I don't pay, so I can't pay the 250 in July. I could pay 150 in July to the loan. I pay my $100 to the doctor. But by doing that, I only have $50 to repay. And I then repay the personal loan in August, and I'm now free of all my debt. Now, before using something like Power Pay strategy in a situation like this, if I pay the minimum for each of my loans, if I pay the minimum to the credit card, I most likely will pay this loan down to October. But utilizing the strategy, I've paid it off in May. I've saved myself 5 months. The personal loan, I paid it off in August. I would have without using the Power Pay strategy, I would have paid it off in October. So I saved myself 2 months. So you can see that there are, even in a small example like this, there are opportunities and avenues for you to save time, overall save money. And you don't put yourself in too much trouble, and you allow yourself to budget and account for incidentals that pop up, like going to the doctor, having to utilize the money for any other purpose. So it calls not just for discipline, but practicality. Those two things have to be paired, and you can utilize a strategy like this fairly well. But there's sometimes when your strategies aren't enough, you might not be able to get through the situation yourself, because we have to be honest with ourselves. We tend to look at it at the macro level. We look at how much debt the country may be undertaking. We look at how the money is being used, or the information we're given on how it's being used. And you start to realize that we're in a tight situation. Similar for individuals, because debt in itself could be a struggle if you don't know what to use it for, how to use it, how to make ends meet. In other words, how to make the money to repay your debt and put yourself in a comfortable position. But although it's a struggle, we have to admit sometimes that we need help. We're not able to go through the situation ourselves and find the solution. Don't be afraid to do that. And as I said, debt, credit, these things are large businesses and industries all across the world. So on the end, when it comes to on the front end, when it comes to lending, there are many avenues and many opportunities there. On the back end, when it comes to persons struggling with paying for the debt, there are also issues there. There are also opportunities there, sorry. So in these opportunities, financial counseling is something that you can utilize. So I'm going to give you three of the easy ways that people in financial counseling offer solutions and options to their clients. One of the ways that they assist persons is by doing some budget counseling. They look at your income, they look at how much you make every week, every month, what have you. They look at your expenses, where you spend, how you spend, and then they look at avenues for redirection or relief. So they say, okay, you spend a certain amount of money every month buying groceries at a place that has maybe a 12% markup, where there are places who have an 8% markup. There are places who might charge you a membership fee, and you might think you're getting savings, and the savings might not be that sufficient or that significant. So sorry. And there are other places where, although the lines might be a little longer, the aisles a little narrower, more narrow. Sorry, you would see that these places offer better savings for you. Don't be afraid to look at your budget and see that there are opportunities that you could spend money in different places or spend less, or even ways that you can make more money, slightly ways that you can make more money, that you can handle your expenses a little better and your debt a little better. Another thing that people utilize are payment plans. So a financial institution will look at your financial situation at the time. This calls for you to be honest. It is very important. You have to be very honest with yourself and the institution. One of the reasons that people have bad credit ratings or bad credit history is because they go through a financial situation alone. They already got into credit agreements with lenders, but they don't tell the lenders what the situation is at the time. And trust me, you could be treated very differently if you're a person who admitted having trouble, or you believe I'm going to have some trouble paying for my car loan, compared to if you're someone who had the trouble but never indicated it to the lenders, simply didn't pay the amount you were supposed to pay when you were supposed to pay it. you'll be treated differently. People will see you more as being dishonest compared to someone who has a difficulty. And as you could imagine, you treat persons who are dishonest differently to how you treat somebody who really needs help. And we tend to respect and honor the persons who say they need help. I have some trouble. I'm not able to pay the $500 I'm supposed to pay every month. But I could probably pay three, probably pay 250. What can you do? What middle ground can we reach for an agreed upon period until I can get myself back into a position of not comfort, but get myself back in the position of being capable to pay the loans properly. You've seen these type of payment plans a lot when it came to the pandemic. There were a lot of institutions that understood that the amount of persons laid off and for the length of time they were laid off, they could not likely repay their loans as usual. A lot of these individuals came to the institutions and said openly, I have an issue, I have a problem. How could you assist me by by not ignoring my payment, but giving me a moratorium by saying, okay, you don't have to pay this month, next month, the third month. Give me a little chance to catch myself, to find out another way in which I'm going to make income, and then I'm going to make you whole. So don't be afraid to be honest. Don't be afraid to go to the financial institution and say, listen, I have a problem. And before it becomes a really big problem, let's see how we could come up with a payment plan that I could cover this loan. And one last way in which financial counseling, there are many ways, but the last one I'm going to go into for this section that financial counseling could assist persons with is restructuring their debt. Now, you could have had a loan, and every institution does this. When they lend you money, they start to calculate how much you're gonna gain them over the term of the loan. If I set you an interest rate of 12%, 5%, 15%, they do their scenarios, including any fees, excluding fees. Once you pay your loan for the term, once you pay the minimum amount, they expect to make a certain amount of money off of you. However, there are persons who go into financial trouble and they're likely not going to repay the full amount of interest that's incurred after they were delinquent this time, that time, what have you. So there is some leeway in which institutions can say, all right, this person already has paid enough interest that even if the loan was current and the loan was being paid properly, they would have paid this already. We would have made the profit we needed to make. However, if we keep tacking on interest on them over and over and over, they're never going to repay this loan. This loan is going to be a bad debt loan for its entire history. So there's some of this interest that we could forgive. There's some of it that we can write off. There's some of it that we can say, let's restructure it into the overall balance of the loan. Give the person basically a fresh start. We could extend the term. We could lower the interest rate, or we could lower the loan payment amount itself, or the monthly payment, to give the person some space and bigger room that they can now see one of their expenses become smaller, become more easily managed. It is another arrangement or new agreement between the lender and the borrower, and it sometimes brings the borrower a lot of relief. Well, most times, let me say most times, it brings the borrower a lot of relief. Once there's someone that meets the criteria that has shown that you can honor your debts, you have also shown that you're someone who tries to repay your debts, the lender now is in a position to say, I can take the risk, the additional risk or the new risk of giving the person a restructured debt. Now, to close off, I want to give you 3 things that you can take away from the presentation. You can use in your daily life. It can give you some ideas in some of the avenues in which you can go to if you are someone who needed financial counseling or advice when it comes to managing your debt. Debt is not something you could just shy away from. Debt is something that persons use not just to pass on the risk of a transaction to a lender, but they use it sometimes as a way to manage your wealth, manage your funds. It's something that could be managed. Is a way that you could take one massive expense and you could spread it across your foreseeable expenses for maybe 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. It's going to come at a higher cost sometimes. However, in the short term, it's going to still save you a lot of time, save you a lot of money. And so it's not something to just shy away from. Don't just treat it like the worst thing in the world. Debt and credit, very important things to be managed. Another thing I want you to take away is understanding the elements of debt. The reason I was very forceful when it comes to the benefits persons can get from shopping around is because there are so many different aspects to debt, to lending, to credit, that you have to become mindful of. Don't be afraid to go into institutions and ask questions. Don't be afraid to go to the front desk, the loans officers, the disbursement officers, what have you. Ask them as many questions as you need. This is the place that potentially is going to get your credit business. You want to find out about interest rates. You want to find out about late fees. You want to see, can I pay my loan at the ATM? Can I pay it online? Can I pay it from one institution to another? Can I pay it from, let's say, you see that you set an interest rate of maybe 12%. Can I pay off faster than agreed? Can I pay any money earlier to the interest or to the principal than normal? Find out these things. Don't be afraid to ask. What's the best loan term you could give me? And loan term being the length of the loan. Find out these things because these things can benefit you in the long run. So understanding the elements of risk of debt, very, very important. And the last takeaway I want people to take from this is to being open to asking for help. Again, debt could be a struggle. It could be an avenue for us to get ourselves in trouble. It could also be an avenue for us to manage our finances in a very practical way. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to pest the persons you know who work in financial institutions. Some people say they don't want to take the work home with them. This is work that could benefit the persons in their lives. I don't think, although it might be annoying hearing the same question over and over, the answers to these questions might save somebody's life when it comes to the person not putting themselves under undue stress and undue strain with debt they can't manage. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to say, look, I'm in trouble. I need assistance with these loans. Don't be afraid to say, I want to find a solution that is outside of the ideas in my mind right now when it comes to loans I have to manage. So again, those are the three things I would like you to take from my presentation. Manage your debt, understand the elements of debt, and be open to asking for help when it comes to the debt. So again, thank you, Janine. Thank you, Shaquani. Thank you for having me to the Marcia Wheat Show. So open up the floor for any questions that the viewers may have.
I want to thank you too, Stefan, for agreeing to come on. This was very educational. It was actually rating. I hope that everyone was rating as well. I see Shaquani had told you guys earlier to get your notepads. I'm glad that you went into the misconceptions of debt and how you were talking about the three common mistakes that we make when doing credit. It's good that you really went into that because I think a lot of persons really don't recognize that you could even get financial counseling. You can go in and you can ask questions even when it's going bad. People are very afraid to do so. So I'm glad that you came out and you were able to say, like, hey, this is not something to be ashamed about. You can just go in and explain your situation and you may not even get more interest tax onto you. I don't think that many persons knew that. So that was another great point that you were able to bring out for us. I don't know if Shaquani have any questions, but I do see that something Nigel Newton has a question for you. He's asking if you can compare and contrast the advantages and disadvantages of bridging the loan.
All right, and good night, Mr. Newton. I can't really speak to the disadvantages of a bridging loan. A bridging loan normally is something used to do not a transaction, but to take a mortgage or a large loan into a transition. So if you're not able to, or if you're trying to get a mortgage and persons have to disperse funds to you in stages. So let's say you were building, especially in the case where you're building, you can see some advantages for it. When you're building and your quantity surveyor or your contractor was able to say, okay, you're going to need $80,000 to build a foundation. You're going to need $70,000 to build to the next stage, another $50,000 to the stage after that. The institution that you're borrowing the money from has to have some level of confidence that once you're done, the property that you've built or you've borrowed the money for is something that could be secured. It's something that has the value on it. That if you run yourself into trouble and you can't repay, they could take the property and cover the loan. So and it, again, is a loan that could be discharged. If you are not building towards the schedule or within the parameters of that agreement of the bridging loan, you're going to run yourself into trouble because the institution at the end of the day most likely is not going to have an asset that they can utilize to pay off your loan. You yourself are not going to have an asset that you can use for any other purpose if you run yourself into that trouble. So I can't really see some disadvantages to it. If there are, I have no problem learning them, but I can see the advantages, especially when it comes to building. It puts both the lender and the borrower in a fairly confident position that the money is disbursed in manageable portions to maintain the asset that the person is going for.
Stefan, I think that was an excellent explanation. I don't know if any other people who are watching tonight, Lawyer Opposition, if you have any questions, don't be afraid, don't be ashamed. He's here right now, so you can ask him directly. If you want to know about anything that may be related to you personally, you can go right ahead. Stefan, I want to ask you a question. Do you find that you have more younger people or older people really coming in to get advice for loans or how to go for it if they want to get a mortgage or something like that? What are you finding? What is it like in this current state of the country?
Well, when I was working as a disbursement officer, I noticed that there were a lot of younger persons who wanted advice when it came to getting a vehicle loan. I guess they wanted you would tend to see a lot of persons asking for things based on the position in life they're in at the time. I saw a lot of persons who were older who may have run themselves into trouble because let's say they got a land loan when they were younger, but they weren't able to put themselves in the position to get a loan then to finish a mortgage, an entire mortgage and stuff. So I find the queries from the older persons tend to be more on, okay, I'm now older, I'm now closer to retirement. I may not be able to pay off my entire loan when I get my
Mm-hmm.
gratuity or when I get my payout. So what avenues are there for me?
Yeah.
So again, that's how financial counseling comes into play. And then there are
Mm-hmm.
younger persons who are saying, "All right, I may want to buy a house. I may want to build things like that. What type of space am I in financially? That what kind of things can I afford?"
Okay, I understand. What I want to ask you though, do you find that in terms of if you're going to now start, say you're now coming out, maybe you're mid 20s, early 30s, would you recommend a person purchasing land, or is it better that the person goes in and look for a mortgage rather than try to get land and then try to say, well, I can do it out of pocket or maybe later I will build something? What do you think is the best route for a younger person?
All right, I sorry to disappoint, but I can't really answer that because
Hmm.
I find that there are some persons who have purchased land. They
Hmm.
realize that the amount that they could qualify for in a mortgage may be lower than what they really want, so they do
Hmm.
it bit by bit. So when you
Okay.
come to qualify for a mortgage, we look at what you can qualify for at that time. Was your income level, was your age at that time?
Okay.
But you as an individual might know that our assessment may be a bit limited. You already have plans that next year I'm going to open some type of revenue stream. I'm going to do some side hustle, something else to bring me some additional income. So I
Okay.
can utilize those funds to start the foundation. I can utilize those funds to build up to the first stage or the second stage of the property. But a financial institution may not want to take on that risk based
Hmm.
on your side hustle or your side job
Hmm.
not seeming like the most sustainable thing. So
I
I've
understand.
seen some people going towards buying a property or getting a loan for a property and then or loan for land and then building up. I have
Hmm.
seen other persons buying the property outright, but you're
Hmm.
found with the cost of building now going up significantly, cost of
Definitely.
land going up significantly, yeah. Some persons are finding themselves in unique trouble because you go for the loan, you've qualified for a loan that, let's say the mortgage is 300,000, 250,000. You start to build, but then the cost of construction goes up so high. Even when you get to your next stage, it's not enough to cover half of what you need. So then when you get to the final, it's not enough to build. So that's a unique problem that you're seeing more often now.
I understand because what I would say when in my younger days, I'm still young, but in my younger days, I used to work with my uncle a lot on construction site, and I would tell you like back then, bags of cement were like $12, $14. Now a bag of cement is around $20 to $25. So in a short time space, something that is a necessity for building has increased so much. So you can imagine what are the other elements, but
Correct.
that's only part. I remember when I first started working when I was working for someone, I went into the bank to try to get an assessment on where I was at, what I would be ready for, what kind of loans I can get as a younger person now looking to further myself. And I remember the guy at that credit union had told me you need to look for a job. You don't make nearly enough money. No, it didn't matter that I didn't have any children, any dependents, anything like that. He just told me that. So I'm so glad that you were able to come on tonight and share all this important information. And we definitely need to have you back on for part two because I feel like this is the beginning. I see another question in the chat here for you. Mr. Watson, if an individual obtained a loan to attach his or her own living quarters to a family house and runs into difficulty, should the institution foreclose on the loan and the family home?
All right, that's a good question. I can tell you the reason that's a good question is because most institutions have legal departments that would strongly advise against even issuing that loan in the first place, because it has to be a case in which the loan that you're going for or the property that you're dealing with is one that is unencumbered by any other interest. They don't want our financial institution is not going to want to take on the risk of lending for you to build on that part of onto another house or onto a house that belongs to a family, and when you run into issues, there is nothing for them then to use to clear it. There are some cases where if the property, if you have interest in the property and the persons who have interest in the property are able to say, yes, I'm gonna issue I'm gonna give him the rights to build, I'm gonna give him the rights to do construction on this property, they may issue the loan in a case like that. But that is then a legal process. You have to sign legal documents, which basically put the entire property into the situation compared to just saying, I'm just worrying about the little piece that I put onto a parcel of land that the person doesn't have interest in. Because the institution has to put itself in a position that if trouble comes, they could get the property entirely, not a piece. Yeah, so it's a good question. So the institution, I assume, could foreclose if they had interest in the entire thing. But that then comes with the agreement and acceptance of all interested parties.
I am so glad that that question came up because in my mind, I'm thinking that if that was an idea in someone's mind, they probably shouldn't go that way.
Yeah, Shaquani, I agree with you.
I see that we
It's very sticky.
uh I see we have one more question here, but I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it. But I'll still put it up. If Barbados can
Yeah, so Shaquani seems to be having some technical issues. So I'll take over. That's no problem. Right. So she was stating that there seems to be one more question, and it says, if Barbados can't repay their debt, what will happen?
All right. I'm not an economist, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but um, I guess there are some cases internationally where countries have fallen into debt issues, not being able to service their debt, and uh, most of it is not going to be a pretty picture. There are a couple countries where you can see that they've run into trouble with their debt and they had to take on austerity measures for like a prolonged time. So I guess you might need an economist to break down exactly what could come to a place like Barbados if that happened, or any other place in the region. Yeah, but it wouldn't be a pretty picture for sure.
I know Shaquani would have mentioned to you that we have one more question, but just take this last question here. I think you may be able to answer this one. From C. McLean, she's asking, can you say something about the flash gas companies that are around?
Sure, I can do that. Most institutions that I would have, I didn't mention them outright, but most of the institutions that lend funds to persons are institutions that, although you can get the funds in a quick time, they don't come with the most exorbitant fees, the most exorbitant or highest levels of interest. Like you might see an interest rate between 11% to 14, 15% on the high end. Those are for your credit unions, your banks. However, these fast cash companies tend to be like, I call them predatory companies. They're payday loans. In my view, I call them payday loans, where you're a person who is struggling to make ends meet. You're struggling to make a purchase that you need, and you need you need those funds as a matter of urgency. You need them within a day or two. A fast cash loan, I'm not going to call the name of any of the companies, but these types of lenders, they push out their loans fairly fast. But because of that, they try to get as much of a return as they could as soon as possible. So you will see them with very high interest rates. Some of them might have interest rates between 20 and 35% sometimes. Some of them have fees that you have to pay if you repay the loan, quote unquote, too fast. If they gave you a loan that they expect you to repay in 2 years or 3 years, if you repay that loan within that period, because after you start paying that loan, it's going to hit you. Hey, this loan real expensive. How you can make ends meet? You might go to another institution to pay it off, but they already account for that by saying, all right, I'm going to still get a fee off of you, not just for the fee of issuing the loan in the first place, but not allowing me to recoup as much of the interest that I was aiming to as possible. So those loans tend to be very expensive. I have a strong feeling. I've never looked at the financials of any of those companies, but I have a strong feeling that they already plan for it and project for a lot of these loans not being on their butts long. They probably set these interest rates and these fees so high because they know if a loan this expensive, there's an opportunity for me, if the person pays it for the full term, to recoup a lot of interest, or there's still an opportunity for me to get a lot of the fees or get some penalties if the person tries to pay off within a month, 2 months, 3 months, things like that. So I call them predatory, but again, that's not to be critical of what individuals need at the time. If you need funds urgently or you want funds urgently, we have to be very honest about the situation a lot of persons find themselves in. As predatory as I say these companies are, they're serving a purpose. There's a reason that these places have different branches or different outlets. There are reasons why these companies have outlets all across the region. There's a need that they're meeting or want they're meeting because some people are finding themselves in a very desperate situation month to month, week to week. And you have to be cognizant of that. So I don't want to be, although I believe that these companies are predatory, they're there for a reason because persons find themselves in situations in which these fast cash companies could give you the money, blink of an eye, and they're going to want a return from that. And the return tends to be expensive.
Stefan, I just want to say thank you very much again. I can see that people are now tuning in, asking questions because this was really a really good presentation. And I know for a fact we will definitely have to bring you back for a part two because we only talk about that and how we can get over this and all that. But we will definitely need to know how can we strategize to do it the right way because there must be a right way when we're whole process. Janine, you have any additional questions for Stefan?
No, please. I think he basically covered everything that We wanted to know, even in his ending, he would have stated what are the takeaways for us to take away from his full presentation, and encourage everyone who would have missed what he would have stated earlier to just rewatch the show a little later. But he was very informative. I can see, as Shaquani is saying, there are more questions coming in at this time, but I know we had you on longer than you would have anticipated. So maybe, as she said, we do need to have a part two of you coming on and maybe answer some of the questions that persons are asking now. But thank you for coming on, though. It was very informative.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Shaquani. So earlier we didn't get to greet our guests. I guess that we can do that now. We can go ahead and say goodnight to Marcia. She's saying hello to you. There's Joyanne Faith that is saying goodnight as well. Goodnight to Tarani. Goodnight to Nina. Ronald Roach. Shirlene Clark. Cami as well. Azra. Mystic Angel. Good night to you guys. Good night to all your opposition. We might. Brian again. Monica Ince. Niger Newton. Yes, we did say good night to you earlier as you asked your question to Shimon. To Stefan, sorry, as well. So thank you guys for logging on and sticking with us. We do have a special guest on for you tonight. You haven't seen him in a while, but he's no stranger to the Marcia Week show. Tonight, I would like to welcome once again Dr. Nathan Wangusi. He's from Kenya, and he's going to be talking about the abduction of the protesters in Kenya. So, good night, Mr. Wangusi. Happy New Year to you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Sorry I wasn't able to do the show as I told you. It's pretty cold up here. We're kind of in the middle of the winter. There's an Arctic freeze that's coming through this week, so it's getting very, very cold. We had snow most of last week, so we are almost indoors all the time because it's just so cold outside. But it also comes with a lot of seasonal allergies and viruses. So I wasn't very well last week to speak, but you can hear it in my voice. But I think I'll be able to make through today's show. But it's nice to see you, and nice to see that you're holding fort while Marcia is having a blast in Kenya.
Yes, she is indeed, but there's also some issues in Kenya which we get to talk about tonight.
Yep.
The protesters being abducted,
Mm-hmm.
and we would like to
So,
know why this is happening.
well, so if you remember, we had this discussion some time back about the protest movement by the Gen Zs. And Gen Zs in Kenya, are generally, young people between the ages of 18 to maybe less than 30, about 20, 27, 28. And in June, they led a popular revolution in which initially it was a protest against a repressive finance bill, which was introducing all sorts of new tariffs and taxes that affected not just the ordinary Kenyan, but particularly the young people. We're going to start taxing everything from tissue paper to sanitary pads, which obviously, are staples or basic necessities in a home, to content online, to new tariffs on basic food items. So obviously there was an outcry for the first time in a very long time. Young people in Kenya reacted. First, it started online, where there was a sustained public outcry on social media platforms, X, Facebook. Particularly on X is where the most of the activity was going on, as well as TikTok. And then it eventually spilled out to the streets, and before long, there was running battles between police and young people. The Kenyan Parliament was set on fire. The county buildings across the country were set on fire. Key government installations were breached. I had a really interesting conversation with one of our leaders of the opposition. His name is Senator Edwin Sufuna. And what he told me was there was some disappointment because the following day, it was I think the 26th, so on the 27th, the young people had said that they were going to storm State House, basically the presidential mansion. And then they didn't, they were not as organized, and I think they were also surprised by how much gains they had made the previous day. So they didn't actually go out the following day. And what he told me, which was pretty interesting, was that folks in government knew that the government was going to be overthrown, but until the young people didn't go out the following day, then that momentum was lost. But what that did, and I think I was giving that background because what that did was that it put the government on toes, but it also threatened the status quo in a way that they never expected. I mean, this was the first time, let alone even during colonial times, where there was an armed revolt. This was the very, very first time that government installations had been breached, not just by protesters, but by young people demanding for change and for their rights. So it was very shocking, not just for the government, but then even us who are social activists, for academics, for politicians in the region, for diplomats, for the international community. Everybody was completely shocked because it was not just unexpected from this particular generation, who everybody assumes is glued to their phones, but also just for Kenya, for something like that to happen. And you remember there was also similar revolutions going on in places like Bangladesh. So I think it was just a shock to the system as a whole, including our government. And then on top of that, it made government officials acutely aware of their vulnerability, right? Now, at home, we have a saying that when a hyena wants to eat its young, the first thing it does. Thanks, Judy. I'm seeing the messages, and it's very complimentary. Thank you for the warm welcome. But I was gonna say, so there's a saying at home that when a hyena wants to eat its young, first it accuses them of smelling like goats. Think about that for a minute. When a hyena wants to eat its young, you first accuse them of smelling like goats. Then you justify. Basically, you have to create a basis to attack vulnerable people or people who you're responsible for, right? So the government started to do was to brand protesters as terrorists or insurrectionists, trying to draw a line between genuine protesters and what they termed as, back to my saying, goats. So you started having this situation where the government was saying, oh, no, there's peaceful protesters and then there's thugs. And we have to deal with the thugs firmly. Basically creating a premise to start violently cracking down on innocent, on peaceful protesters. And like most progressive constitutions in the world, the Kenyan Constitution protects free speech. It also protects freedom of association. So the government starts making these accusations, and all of a sudden we have disappearances. To date, I think there's about 82 young people who have just disappeared into thin air. Bodies have been found. Funny stories have come out about, like, oh, there's a serial killer. Like a few months ago, I think 20 or 30 bodies were found of murdered young people, girls and boys, of very tender age, 18 to 27. And then they said, then shortly after that, they arrested this guy and they said, oh, apparently there's a serial killer on the loose. So they find bodies in sacks. It's not even a joke. They find human bodies in sacks in a quarry. And that was apparently that's the government's position and explanation. So people started to ask questions. And then over time, fortunately, in Kenya, there's a lot of mobile connectivity, there's a lot of CCTV. So some of these abductions where people were being literally abducted in broad daylight. I think you can show some of those videos that I shared in broad daylight. Were caught CCTV. Um, so obviously, big outcome where civil society, parents of this, where and there's a particular incident that just highlighted how haywire this government had gone. Where can you imagine? This is not even, you can't even make this stuff up. The sitting attorney general's son was abducted, and then nobody could tell you where he was. The sitting attorney general's son. I have a video there. Maybe you can play it.
Oh, that would be the first one you sent?
Let me just check. But it's the last video I sent you. So that would be, the last video. No, not the last.
Okay, no problem.
The second one.
Okay, this is the one with the Justin Muturi?
Yes, Justin Muturi. Okay. So just that videos, you get a sense of how severe this is.
Yeah.
And Angela,
Haji of abducting his son, Leslie Muturi, in June last year. Muturi, who at the same time was the country's attorney general, has claimed that Haji confessed to President William Ruto that he was behind his son's abduction and only released him after the president instructed him to do so. NTV's David Mudoka reports on Muturi's bombshell that may just reveal who's behind the wave of abductions in the country.
After being challenged by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, to record a statement at DCI Kilimani in Nairobi on the abduction of his son Leslie, Public Service Cabinet Secretary Justin Muturi accepted the challenge, arriving at the Kilimani police station a few minutes past 2 p.m. on Tuesday to tell his side of the story. In his 3-page statement, Muturi has given a blow-by-blow account of how the abduction happened, his efforts to secure the release of his abducted son, and President William Ruto's successful intervention. Muturi begins by stating, and I quote, on the 22nd of June 2024, at 9:29 p.m., I received a call from Wairimu, the wife of my son Leslie Muturi, telling me that she had been informed by Embakasi West MP Mark Munje, who was together with Leslie at an entertainment joint in Kilimani, that he had been abducted by armed, hooded gangsters. Muturi states that he immediately began the search for his son, stating, and I quote, I called the Inspector General of Police Japhet Kome, and he promised to circulate the information among various police stations and then call me back. I then called Interior PS Raymond Omolo, and he assured me that he will take action. Muturi, who at the time was the country's Attorney General, continues, I also tried to reach the Director Criminal Investigations, DCI Mohammed Amin, but his phones went unanswered. I tried calling the National Intelligence Service NIS Director, Nudin Haji, but he did not answer either. The Public Service CS for the state. After an hour, I called the IG again. He informed me that he had alerted all personnel on all routes, suspecting it was a robbery. I then called Raymond Omolo again, and he informed me that he had contacted several agencies to assist in finding Leslie. However, he was still inclined to believe it was a carjacking. Muturi says he escalated the matter, saying, around 3 a.m. I decided to send a WhatsApp message to the president. Someone gave me the contact of Saeed Kiprotich Mohammed, the director of Anti-Terrorism Protection Unit, ATPU, as we had identified the Prado used to abduct my son and learned that such vehicles were often used by ATPU. I called Mohammed, but he did not answer or respond to my text message. The next day, Muturi states, between 10 and 11 a.m., a friend from NIS called informing me that my son was being held by their people. Just before 1 p.m., I decided to call Professor Kithure Kindiki, the Interior Cabinet Secretary then. 15 minutes later, Professor Kindiki called back, saying he had spoken with the DG of NIS who denied holding Leslie. Running out of options, the CS says, I decided to drive to State House to see the president in person. I informed the president about my message, and he explained that his phone had crashed due to an overload of messages. Since it was not functioning properly, I requested that he call Nurdin Haji directly. Muturi says that was when his worst fears were confirmed. The statement concludes, standing outside the pavilion, I heard the president ask Nurdin Haji if he was holding my son. Nurdin confirmed that he was indeed holding my son, and the president instructed him to release Leslie immediately. Slightly over an hour later, Leslie called me to say he had been released and was at home. End of quote. The statement comes only days after Muturi had hit out at the government for failing to end abductions. His scathing attack was met with backlash from a section of Ruto allies who threatened to impeach Muturi.
Wewe ujiuzulu, kuja ongea huku nje kama raia mwema. Ushike microphone kama raia mwema ukiongelesha ukigonga hiyo serikali. Lakini huwezi gonga serikali ukiwa ndani yake. Haiwezekani.
I would just say bring it on. At my age, I'm not the kind of person to respond to some of it is very, very perfunctory statement made by fairly inexperienced politicians. I think they're not worthy my response. So if anybody thinks that I don't know what I'm doing, then they are up for a rude shock.
Amid threats of impeachment by a section of President William Ruto's allies, Public Service Cabinet Secretary Justin Muturi is sticking to his guns, setting the stage for a looming showdown in Parliament over his removal from office. David Mudhoka, NTV from the Kilimani Police Station, Nairobi.
You were muted, Dr. Ragunzi.
Oh, okay, yeah. So thanks for indulging me on that video. I'll try and explain just in brief. The implications of the sitting attorney general. This is not even. You can't make this up. It's not even. It's a bit surreal that almost the third or fourth in command in the country has their son abducted by the National Intelligence Service, and nobody knows where this child is. And then, and you know what Kenyan started to say is, if they're even abducting children of senior government officials, like, who is safe, right? And then there's been a stream of them, many of them caught on CCTV, or people taking videos of like young people being, grabbed by hooded men on the streets. And some of these people don't identify themselves. Some of them are known because they're so prolific and always out on the streets doing this dirty job. But we all know it's the National Intelligence Service. Like that kind of behavior, the kind of vehicles they are using, the methods they're using, the ability to actually track people on their phones to a geolocation and like grab them, that's just indicative that it's really the National Intelligence Service. Now, this is really concerning when a country starts to see its citizens as the enemy, right? Typically, when you have like real subversive activities of, trying to either overthrow or disrupt the government, it makes sense, because that's what intelligence services are really for. They're supposed to be there to protect the country's interests internally, but more so externally. So now you've stopped fighting all your terrorists, you've stopped fighting all your actual adversaries, and then now you're turning on your citizens. It's ridiculous. It's concerning. And then on top of that, there's an attempt to censorship. So what happened was there's a young blogger / artist. Kenyans are very prolific social media warriors. They're frightening, not even prolific. Kenyans are world renowned. In fact, I remember there was a funny incident in which the Kenyans discovered that McDonald's in Kenya, we have very similar to what I saw in Barbados, but McDonald's in Kenya is importing potatoes. That's what actually Kenyans found out. And Kenyans on Twitter, we call them, attacked McDonald's so much, the CEO of McDonald's had to come and apologize to Kenyans in Kenya. On another occasion, someone had a bad experience. I was just listening to the previous speaker, and he was talking about like financial institutions. Financial institutions in Kenya don't mess around with Kenyans, because a rumor has crashed 2 banks in Kenya, Chase Bank and Imperial Bank. Those 2 banks gave bad service or bad loans to customers, and then they went on social media, and social media blew up so badly, people had a capital flight from the bank, and the bank collapsed in like 2 or 3 days. So Kenyans on Twitter are frightening. And then in this case, government realized like literally their activities and organizing on social media can actually usurp or overthrow the government or disrupt government activities to the point they just don't, they can't operate. So obviously they see, young people on social media as a threat. One young guy took an old song, it's an old African, actually Congolese song called Kasongo. Kasongo is a love song. It's just a song about, this guy who loved this woman called Kasongo, and, he was heartbroken and she left him. But then for some reason, Kenyans decided that Kasongo means thief. It's a very popular song. We can play it just for comical value. But they started calling the president Kasongo, and they've created these cartoons, and I'll share with you just so that you can also share to the viewers. Called Kasongo, who's a thief, who's going around, stealing, killing, pickpocketing Kenyans, and it's become a completely viral cartoon. So the young man who developed this cartoon, and I people are saying that it's him, but those are just rumors. He went on him or another, but he shared this particular image that got him into a lot of trouble. But someone went on used artificial intelligence to draw to develop a picture, very very realistic picture of the president dead in a casket. And that was kind of the last straw. So then there was a string of abductions of social media activists, and they were trying to find who developed that image. I don't want, it's a bit gory, so sharing it would not be appropriate, but then it was a very realistic image of the president literally dead in a casket. So it's become this like culture war between the young people and not just the government, but older people, where they're like, you're destroying our country, and then the older generation, in this case the government, are reacting by abducting and terrorizing them. So there's a big outcry, both internationally and locally, for young people to be released. As a result, in fact, the president eventually, there's a lot of noise from from citizens. So he accidentally admitted that he was the one abducting, and he said, oh, he was disciplining these young people. Apparently the government needs to discipline them because the president is not, their families are not doing a good job at disciplining them. So they had this like excuses that they were giving, but then eventually they conceded, and all of a sudden several young people who had been missing for weeks and days on end were released. But I think their lives are also threatened, so they've not also spoken up to what happened to them. So we have a crisis in Kenya that's really unfortunate, because we have a young population that has completely rebelled. They know the power of their collective. Government is confused because they don't have any specific leaders to like point to, because typically when you have this sort of revolutionary movements, you have leaders, you have individuals who they can go and arrest and then silence the movement. But then it's like Hydra. It has so many different heads, this sort of distributed organizing that's happening on social media, so that nobody in government knows really who's driving these protests, and then who's really organizing, who is the brain. But it's a collective, and it's very, very hard for the government to deal with it. So we really have a crisis. The young people have also been very firm. Government is not moving. The young people are not moving. So it's become extremely hard for the leaders to govern, because they're now resorting to this kind of strong arm tactics, but it really isn't working. I wanted you to play this move, but if there are any questions, I can start to answer.
Yes. Oh, so you want me to play the one that sent, or the one that you sent me?
The one I just sent.
Last sent. Okay, great. But before we go on to that, I know you said it's a crisis, but at the same time, I think that a lot of young people around the world can also take a page off of these children back in Kenya, these Gen Zs, because sometimes people may say young people are not interested in what's happening in the country. But here you have in Kenya, where they are very attentive to what is happening. They're taking over these social media platforms, not only to just go on to scroll on Instagram or Facebook just for no reason, but to take serious action against something that is infecting their future. So it's very good to see that the Gen Zs have taken on, and you were saying to us back last year that they also know their constitution very well. So that is also a plus. I think that we in the Caribbean and around the world can really take a page out of their books. And to see that the Attorney General had his own son abducted, this is very crazy. It seems they really don't care about anyone at all, if these are the lengths they're willing to take.
And I think what is really important is, and as you're saying, the kind of engagement, that's really what is driving a lot of the what I know is a transformational shift in culture. When you have an entire generation who have come up and are not just willing to put their collective wisdom, but also to put their themselves on the line for social change and for social justice and transformation of the economy and their country, it's really powerful. And as you're saying, I mean, this young people around the world can learn from, because you have tools in your hands previous generations did not. In the past, just think about it. If you are a revolutionary leader or a social activist in the 1990s, just even in Kenya, I've met some older activists, and they say, it was really difficult for us to organize because, you had to meet to communicate, or you had to call, and your phones would be tapped. So even before you could get to where you were going, your phone has been tapped. They already know that you're going there. They already know the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And now with social media, you can have a lot of these conversations way outside of government. Right? You can have anonymity. You can have leaders. That's why government in Kenya has become confused. And actually, that abduction is trying to sow a seed of fear.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to sow. They don't know who they're chasing after, so they're just going to grab whoever they can that they think is influential. And then the strategy is, if we can't find one person, we're just going to torment a few and hope that is going to sow like seeds of fear in the population. But what is happening is that the more they are abducting, the more young people are making noise, and social media noise. Initially used to ignore it, but then this noise can even change the fortunes of a country, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can change perception of people around the world, your country, make other world leaders conscious of what is going on in your country. It can change public perception, even cause a revolution that will overthrow a government. Because obviously, Kenya is looking at Bangladesh, other countries, and wondering, the government is wondering, is this going to happen in Kenya? Right?
Yeah.
The big fear they have is the military, because our military did not respond with violence to the social revolution last year. And suddenly the government realized that they don't even have control of their own military, right? Because such things need to be put to the test, right? You have to put this you have to put them to task. So we fear the military.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you have big protests on the streets, the military did nothing. So of course, if I'm sitting there and I'm the president, I'm wondering, oh my word, even my own military doesn't really support me. They understand their mandate, that their mandate is not to protect against internal strife. That's not their mandate. Their mandate is to protect Kenyans' borders. So suddenly, this man realizes that he's not even as powerful as he thought. And then there was a lot of blame going around as well about, which government agency should have been responsible in knowing that there was so much discontent on the streets. And they blamed the National Intelligence Service. In fact, the former vice president, who was then impeached because he came out and publicly condemned and castigated the intelligence service, he was impeached because of that, because he pointed and said the intelligence service should have known that not only is there discontent, but it's bad enough that they could be possibly a civil uprising. And for that, he was impeached. So what is really happening is this jerk reaction, instead of actually addressing the core issues which these young people are talking about. And what is going to happen is, over time, there's sort of a social consciousness that has come out of this movement. Initially, people were saying, oh, we want a revolution. And then, they took a step back. Kenyans are very pragmatic people. They say, no, we want a country that is governed by rule of law. That is not something that the government gives us. That is something we bestow on ourselves as a people. We want a country that is constitutional. That constitution doesn't belong to anyone. It doesn't belong to the government. That is our constitution as a people. We want a country where human rights are respected. That is not something that the government gives us. I'm endowed as a human being, as a citizen of this country, by my creator, with these rights. People started having these conversations, trying to understand, what does it actually mean to be a citizen, right? And that is very dangerous for any government, right? It is very dangerous if the people of Barbados start asking, wait, can we just actually open up our constitution and see what it says about my rights as a citizen? Does the government have a right to surveil me? Does the government have a right to take away my freedom of choice, freedom of movement? And when people start asking those questions, looking at their constitution, they realize, wait, the constitution says, no, I have a right to my privacy. Then things like the cybercrime bill will never see the light of day, because to begin with, you'll be voting
Exactly.
right? So I think it's important for as I'm saying, like, these abductions that we're seeing are just, they're symptomatic of a government that's realizing that its citizens are becoming smart. In Kenya, we have a saying, wajinga waliisha. You know what that means? The fools, we no longer have fools in. Another saying, the donkey got high. We don't have idiots. There are no more idiots, so you can't lie to. So and I'm hoping, that through these conversations, people will start to think through how they can use their collective wisdom through social media, through meetings, through protest, to actually start to assert who they are, right? I think it's very meaningful what is happening in Kenya, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned for not just the Caribbean, but for the rest of the world.
Most definitely. And I know you would have mentioned earlier that the activists were saying it, the older activists now were saying it was very much harder for them back then, but obviously they don't recognize they would also pave the way for this revolution to happen. Sometimes it don't happen in your time, but you're actually paving the way for others to break through. And now these Gen Zs would have taken on what they would have started and being able to use the social media, better than they didn't have it. So they were able to use social media that they have now as a tool. Instead of going out and destroying places or what's not. But I know you said you wanted to show the video with Ruto, so you still want me to go ahead and play that as well?
Yeah, I'll play that video. So it's just an example of how, young people rattle the president so much just because by showing cartoons to him so much that his entire administration. Because, I think you have to understand about politicians. In this kind of political, they live on. Politicians are the most narcissistic people you ever meet, because everything is about how people see me. So when you go after that in a way that is effective and in a way that changes people's perception of that person, because young people in Kenya have branded their president a thief, and everybody now calls him a thief. So he's trying to portray this image of a world leader, of like a generous, and progressive governor, but the young people have completely torn up that image on social media, and now the world sees him from their perspective. They are not quiet, and they make noise every day. They make noise every day for 24 hours. So the government has lost its message, right? So it must be very frustrating. So obviously this kind of jerk reaction is going to abduct young people.
Right.
Become
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video so the viewers can see what's happening.
Yeah. And then I'll take some questions.
Yeah.
Ruto just hinted, knowing those who have been abducting his critics.
Na yale yamesemekana mambo ya abduction tutakomesha.
President William Ruto has seemingly hinted at knowing the individuals behind the growing cases of abductions in Kenya. While the Police Inspector General continues to deny any knowledge of the culprits, the president has broken his silence, attributing the abductions to poor parenting and misconduct on social media.
Nataka niulize wazazi, kila mzazi tafadhali, hawa watoto ni baraka kwetu, tumepatiwa na Mwenyezi Mungu. Kila mzazi achunge watoto wake, tuweke kushughulikia watoto wetu. Sisi kama serikali tutafanya sehemu yetu.
According to President Ruto, the abduction stems from young Kenyans misbehaving online by insulting him and his administration. He suggested that if parents take responsibility and warn their children against such behavior, the abduction would cease.
Tuweke kushughulikia watoto wetu. Sisi kama serikali tutafanya sehemu yetu. Na yale yamesemekana mambo ya abduction tutakomesha. Ndio vijana wa Kenya waweze kuishi kwa amani, na vile wawe na nidhamu na wawe wangwana, tuweze kujenga Kenya tukiwa pamoja. Tumekubaliana?
This remarks has sparked widespread outrage and speculation, as it seems to contradict his earlier stance denying the existence of such incidents. President William Ruto previously claimed that no abductions had taken place under his administration and that he was unaware of any such activities.
There is a family, any family, that their child or their friend or their relative went to a demonstration, whether it is last year or this year, and never came back. I want to know the names, because I will take firm and decisive action. Because as I talk to you today, I don't have a single name of somebody who has been abducted or disappeared. I do not want a situation where a Kenyan disappears. There were days when people were found 20, 30 in the Vayala here, executed. I want to promise you and to promise the people of Kenya that under my administration, there will be no Kenyans in Rivayala or any other river or in any other place.
However, his recent statements suggesting he can stop the abductions if certain conditions are met have raised eyebrows, leaving Kenyans questioning his involvement or complicity.
Reject. Zakao must go.
And the controversy deepens when considering that these abductions have reportedly targeted individuals who criticize the government, particularly during the anti-finance bill protest. And many are now convinced that the president's comments inadvertently confirm his administration's role in these disappearances.
Arrest them and make it public that you have arrested people and take them before courts of law so that it becomes a deterrent to those who are misusing computers, artificial intelligence, not only to insult and to do very uncouth things, very uncivilized things.
Adding fuel to the fire, government officials such as Kimani Ichung'wah have echoed similar sentiments, urging the Directorate of Criminal Investigations to arrest individuals who misuse the internet by harshly criticizing the government.
Na niwaulize pia vijana wetu, tukue na heshima. Hata kama huniheshimu mimi kama kiongozi, heshimu familia, heshimu watu na jamii ambazo hao viongozi wanatoka kwake. Leo tunaweza sema humpendi Spika Wetangula, lakini kumbuka ako na mzazi na ni mtoto wa mzazi. Ako na watoto, ni baba ya watoto. And the same respect we expect as Kenyans. Let us extend the same level of respect to each other, to our leaders, both in the political arena, in church, because I've seen the same insults being leveled against even our church leaders. But to DCI, you must make use of the laws that we created and we enacted in Parliament back in 2018, specifically the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act of 2018. I know it had challenges in court in 2019, but the same courts reaffirmed that law and all the provisions of that law, if the DCI are not aware and if the police are not aware, are
So did you observe what they were saying at the very end about the cybercrime bill? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. I apologize. So even though the video was playing, I wasn't able to see everything because it was sticking for me. But if you could elaborate.
So at the very I wanted you to
We're not hearing you.
I was me that wasn't.
Yeah.
They said that was breaking up.
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. So I think this is important for Barbadians who have been dealing with this cybercrime bill. So you realize we had a similar. It was challenged in exactly the same way, but you can see how it's now being used, right? Because the government is now weaponizing it against citizens who are demanding their rights. So you can see, what eventually happens with such legislation. So I think Kenya is just kind of further down the line, but governments around the world kind of they learn from each other, and they are watching what is happening in other countries to say, if in Kenya we can potentially have a revolution because of social media, we should start putting measures in place in our own countries so that when that happens, we can suppress it. So just keep that in mind. There's a question there. Has Kasamo turned his back on the Gen Zs? I believe so. There's a young man called Kasamuel Makure, very articulate, and he was one of the very powerful voices that came out of the protests, during the protests actually. So that the protest had its own leaders. Every protest has its own leaders that I think emerge. And then after the protests subsided, he started sort of causing up slowly. It was very slow and gradual, but then young people were very quick to call him out. But he started causing up to the government, the very same government that he had been such a fierce critic just a few months before. But I'll tell you something about Nigel. I'll try and explain why I think that is. Kasambol is he's an example of what has actually been happening with a lot of young activists. So remember, these young activists, many of them are jobless. Many of them come from very disadvantaged backgrounds. Like Kasambol, he dresses well and he carries himself in, with a lot of composure. However, he comes from a very disadvantaged background. So what government basically does with young people like that is they offer them jobs, they offer them, money and positions and support, and that way they're very quickly able to silence them. So typically, what they'll start with, for even a lot of these young activists who are being abducted, they'll try and negotiate with them, where they're like, oh, we can give you a job, we can give you a fancy position in government, and then when they refuse, then it gets violent. So
I actually was looking him up just now. Sorry to break you. You want me to let the viewers see who he is?
Yeah, let me just share.
Yeah, I found him online.
Yeah, but I think
okay.
He was in let's see here, on a short video so that we're not here for. But yeah, so as I was saying, they basically bribe these young people because they know they're disadvantaged. You have a skill, you articulate, you can move masses, and then they've basically used that against young people. So that's really what is happening. If you had found another video, you can play it, but then this is you can maybe just play the first couple of minutes so that
yeah, no problem. The one you sent me, I can play. That's fine.
Yeah, I just sent you but yeah, so he's very articulate, and slowly by slowly being kind of opted into government. And people are concerned that happened to sort of quiet.
Yeah.
But what has happened, the more they've done those kind of things, the more young people have made noise on social media. Again, because Kasama was not really one of the leaders. He was an authoritative voice. And then, they came together, tried to kind of get a hold of the movement as leaders. But then young people said, we are leaderless. We're not here because we want to become politicians or to make politicians or to make activists famous. We're here because we want a transformational change in our country. So it's been very difficult, not just for the young people themselves to manage themselves, but also for government to manage themselves. So yeah, please play the video.
Yeah, no problem.
you very much, Trevor. I think our core goal is for good governance. The war on graft, employment for young people, getting rid of unconstitutional places. And I've seen a lot of the media houses grossly misquote whatever this thing is by calling it anti-government protests. These are pro-good governance protests. And whatever it is that we're doing, the agitation that we are making is simply that the government does what it was mandated to do. And a lot of the times the people have asked, so what do the Gen Zs want? What is the logical conclusion? We're saying that if the political class did exactly what they are mandated to do in the Constitution, if our MPs represented us and not their own selfish interests, if the president abided by the rule of law and did not employ unconstitutional people or directed, if the whole political elite did not direct funds to unconstitutional places, we would be happy to stay home. But now it comes upon us to agitate for good governance. And today you saw the doctors occupied MOH, and these are concessions that have been made by the consistent, concerted efforts of the youth to ensure that we have good governance.
Okay. Shakira, in your view, what is the one thing you're pushing for as Gen Z?
I think he's actually taken words from my mouth.
Yeah.
I agree with what he said 100%. As the youth of Kenya, we want good governance. We want the Constitution of Kenya that was promulgated in 2010 to be implemented in its full entirety. We want to see leaders serving Kenyans rather than their greed, their pockets, and the people within their small circles.
Do you have time frames for this?
As soon as possible. We want it as soon as yesterday because it's long overdue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Mwansa on this. Mwansa, what is your view? What do the young people want now?
What we want, for me, we've been speaking in English. Seems they are not understanding. Allow me to speak in Kiswahili, or a simple language. Yenye hata mabadi watasikia pale nyumbani. And what I like to kuambia ni sisi kenye tunataka, hatutaki hata promises zenye walitupea. We don't want the promises they told us in their manifesto. We want the bare minimum. Like my friend has said, what is in the Constitution? What are our rights? Like if I can just in a minute give you a person like what a young man goes through back out there. Maybe the president doesn't know because he doesn't have young people around him. If he has people around him, those are people who are wako na majob, wako tu sawa, hajui kenye tunapitia. Mimi nimemaliza shule, nimeenda mtaani, at least nipate kazi ya kufanya, hakuna majob. Nimetoka home, nimeenda ushago, nianze kulima, napewa fertilizer fake, fertilizer ambao siwezi fanya nayo farming. Natoka huko na apply job PSC, ndio nikuja niko intern. Nakuja kufanya intern kazi, hakuna kitu napewa. The only thing that is in the office is only tea, lunch, breakfast, and even at night you can even take home. That's the only thing that they give us. 1 year later, nimeishi huko Roysambu kwa bedsitter, wajui venye nalipa rent, wananiambia nirudi home after nimefanya.
Yeah, so he went from being, the poster child of the protest to basically betraying the trust of the young people. I've just shared a couple images maybe that can show that. But yeah, this is what is happening. These are young people who are not employed, some of them. Like I know he is an artist and a musician, so he's not steadily employed. So obviously if someone comes to him with a bag of money and tells him, hey, tone it down a bit and, come to our side, or we are going to change and harass you. So this is the same person who just a few weeks before was very fiercely criticizing the government and leading protests. So it's really about money. A lot of it has to do with, these young people being bought off and paid off. Which betrays the trust of obviously the movement, but in any movement you have those types of characters. I'll take another question. Yeah, so you got this is the same person who was leading protests just a few weeks before. Question for the guests: what is the situation likely to be in Kenya for the next 6 months, given the most recent developments? I think there's what you need to understand fundamentally about the psyche of the movement is not that they want to burn the country to the ground. That's not the idea. It's not that they want to revolt and usurp the government or have a coup. Kenyans don't have. They're very conscious of sort of the constitutional spaces in which they exist. They know that, they have a good constitution within which, if citizens and government operated properly, you'd have a very progressive country. But what Kenyans are basically saying, what the young people are saying, is that the government is not meeting its mandate. There's all sorts of problems. The economy is in shambles. The health system has fallen apart because they tried to implement a new program. They've tried to introduce a new curriculum in the school system, which is just not working. There's obviously a population dividend, a labor dividend that's not being met. So government is doing things like trying to export Kenyan labor, which is really not a solution. You need to create and grow jobs at home. And at the same time, there's very high levels of corruption. And as you're seeing, even within the security services, like, how can people just be abducted on the streets in broad daylight? That tells you there's something wrong in the country. So what is really happening is the young people are, as I was describing earlier, are realizing that they not just have a responsibility, but control over the destiny of their country. They're the stewards of their constitution. They're supposed to be the stewards of their country. And they're realizing, if we let this government and subsequent governments destroy our country, it's us who have to live here. Because what a lot of young Kenyans say is that we don't want to. I don't want to have to leave my home country to come and, as an economic refugee, because that's basically what a lot of Kenyans have to do. We want to be at home. We want to live in our own country and live and work. But I know that if a person like me, if I went back home and started speaking up, you better best believe I'll be hooded and disappear quite quickly.
So the situation where basically you're just being abducted for speaking up for your rights. I saw the guy, even in the video, he was just basically saying that they just want the government to do the right thing, and that is a big issue, just to get the government to do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
It's mind blowing. I mean, it's not like they're protesting for something that is bad or they want a particular artist to come there. It's just basically for the government to follow the constitution that they would have created, and that is a big issue. You can't get this in a movie.
Yeah. They're asking government to do the right thing. So what I expect is that agitation is not going to stop. So regardless of the abductions, regardless of the threats, Kenyans know that they have the right message. They know that they have moral authority that not just comes from them being citizens, but also from their very own constitution. And what is really happening is that there's this tension in the country. And the reason is you have a political class which is corrupt, which is pillaging the country. And then you have a citizenry which is saying, no, you can't continue to do those things and expect for our country to move forward. And then people, also Kenyans say, as I was saying, fools, there are no more fools in this country. You're not governing people who don't know what their rights are. We're also tired of this nonsense. But then they also say, Kenya to harm you. We are not going anywhere. So something is going to have to give. But we're also not going to burn our country. We can go to the streets. We can demand our rights. We don't want to destroy our country. We want to fix this country. So I think that agitation will continue. The other thing that is happening, just to close out that my answer, is we are coming close to an election. So there's also a lot of anxiety in the political class. In 2027, there's an election in August, but campaigns start, we're in 2025. So political season in Kenya, so by the end of this.
So just to ask a question, sorry, about your guys' election. You know that the election is for sure in August in 2027. You guys have a fixed date for election?
Yeah, we know that there's a fixed date for election, but then the campaigns will start next year, probably even next year, but then it starts heating up this year. So politicians know they're on the block, right?
But we don't have a fixed date here in Barbados.
Oh wow!
Yeah, we do.
So Prime Minister calls election, right? It's a
yes. So we actually would have had an election in 2018. It's supposed to be every 5 years, but we had an election in 2018, and then we would have had one in 2022.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here I thought was really interesting. Has a complaint been made to the African Union? So we're in a really tight spot. So the other thing that is happening, which is related to the African Union, is our former leader of the opposition is running to be the boss of the African Union, and he's come together with the government to try and get that seat. That was kind of the unholy compromise that they made for the opposition to not criticize government and not to support the Gen Z protests. So that's what is really going on. So we know that even going to the AU,
right, doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't help us, because your protests are going to fall on deaf ears. So I think Kenyans have this and I think it's just a really, and I wish Barbadians could get to this point where they realize there is no one else coming to help you. Barbados is not going to change because someone from space or someone from the US or someone from Kenya is going to come and solve your problems. Kenyans have got to that point where they realize these problems are ours to solve. When you have young people spilling out on the streets, they have given up. But they have given up on the idea that there's any solution that's coming from outside. And that's a very powerful realization. So the African Union is not going to help Kenya. We don't even want their help. Only Kenyans are going to help Kenyans. Because even if they make a complaint to the African Union, what is the African Union going to do?
Nothing, because there's no opposition. It seems like there's not even an opposition right now either.
Yeah, and they're with the opposition. So what are they going to do? Even if we make a okay, so the root of the protest was that one of the roots of the protest, if you remember, was the ambassador of the US had actually handheld our president and tried to kind of implement some of these neo-colonial programs of tax indenture in Kenya. That came from the American government, and if it comes from American government, it's also supported by the EU and other countries. So the EU is not going to help us. So even if we make complaints to BBC or CNN or write news articles that go all the way to the Washington Post and the New York Times, makes no difference. What is going to happen, if there's going to be any change, it's going to happen in the streets of Kenya. That's I think the most powerful realization that the young. It's a hard thing to realize, right? Because you realize that responsibility falls on me, right? If Barbadians are having problems, I still remember with the cybercrime bill, the solution is not going to come from outside. And I was so proud of Janine and the young people who came here to DC to advocate. It's our problem. This is not a problem that's going to be solved outside. If you have water problems, don't look outside for solutions. Those solutions are going to have to come out from Barbadians, right? It's you who has to go to the streets, not anyone else. You're not going to have, even if you write letters to international bodies and the UN and world leaders, those solutions have to look at, right? They happen on the streets of Bridgetown. They happen in Christchurch, if I remember
you remember?
They happen on those beautiful beaches. They happen on the Marcia Weeks show. They're not going to happen anywhere else. So that change is going to have to come from internally. And I think the fact, it's sad that these abductions are happening, but they are indicative, right? They are a very, very important indicator that government is realizing that Kenyans are tired, and they're the ones who are taking action. They're not waiting for anyone. They're not waiting for their army. They're not waiting for the police. The young people are not even waiting for their parents. In fact, the reason why Leslie, that AG's son, was abducted is because he was involved in organizing the protests against his own parents, right? So they're not even waiting. These young people are not even waiting for their parents to tell them what to do. No, right?
So it's good to see that the young people it's good to see that young people are taking charge, but it's been a shame that the parents, it seems, that don't even have the common sense that to do the right thing even.
But why are you waiting for parents? Like, parents don't know,
Right.
Right? They're not, their lived experience is not the same. I'm telling Janine, like the lived experience that your parents had when they were your age, they were living maybe in a country where they had, I remember we had this discussion, remember, about like the fact that as a 20-something-year-old Barbadian, you're not looking forward to like the same life that your parents did, because you know you can't afford it, right? Young Kenyans, not my age, I'm slightly, these are my younger brothers and sisters. They don't have the same opportunities. They don't have the same mobility. They can't buy a home and become parents and start families, because they're like, how am I going to afford it, right? You can't even get a job, right? So the lived experience of your parents, you, Janine, is not the same as you. So why are you waiting for them to give you solutions, right? Why are you waiting for them to give you solutions? They don't have they don't have solutions for you.
Right.
The Kenya like, I'm trying to like pull out what is really happening. An attorney general of a country, this man is wealthy, he's influential, his lived experience and the lived experience of his child are completely different. Why is the child on the street and him in his office asking the president, where's my son? Because the lived experience of that young person is completely different, right? So why should you, Janine, wait for your parents to tell you what to do? You are highly,
you know the right thing to do,
right? You see things from a perspective that's different. You have exposure that they will never ever have, even in their adulthood. When I talk to my younger cousins and younger siblings, by the time I was 20, all I cared about was like my looks, sports and girls. I wasn't like, it's like, dodging bullets because my lived experience is completely different. So how can I child or my daughter get, don't do this, or their lived experience is completely different. When young people are finding that the only result I have is to go and protest online, make so much noise, because their lived experience, the frustrations they're having, and the young people are completely different. They don't have jobs. Remember this being said specifically by, I believe it was you, Janine, that I don't have the same idea. So if you're seeing parents who are here from Barbados, don't hold your children back. Stop telling them to be good children, sit at home, and they don't have the same experiences as you. They don't have the same opportunity. They'll never have. I noticed, it was very obvious to me, a lot of the young people are still staying in their parents' houses. Why is that? Because they can afford. I was surprised by the amount of you just speaking about interest rates. I thought that 18%, 18% interest rates on conventional loans, on mortgages. That's insane. 18% is insane. It means that the economy is cracking. And I'm sure your parents, the reason they could afford is because the incomes were high. So parents, stop holding back your young people from changing the country. Stop holding back your young people, saying, oh, you have to behave. Oh, we were not like that when we were. Hey, it's not the same. Right? 18%. In the US, interest rates currently, I think, 4 or 5%.
Whoa.
And that's high. I think you are closer to 2.75. How are you going to buy a house on a salary of 18% interest? No, it's not economic or feasible. So I'm not the young people, but the parents, because Kenyan parents also they started to realize when they were listening to the kids and seeing how they behave, that there's a disconnect. Their lived experience is completely different. They don't have this mobility, and they have it individually. Their age group don't, right? So you, in my parents who, I'm an exception in my generation, right? I know that coming out of my so when I look around at my age mate, they're not able to do the same things that I'm able to. Right? So my lived experience, even just with me, 5 or 10 minutes, not the same. So I should be holding back those young and demanding that we change our society. Parents, those are, in fact, parents are those are the ones who hold the leash so tight that young people can't go out there and advocate for their own rights.
Yeah.
Right? You can't go out there and say, "Power is in my vote. The power is in my voice. The power is in our country." So that's just my tip. Hope I've helpful. I'm not saying any more.
Sorry, you would have dropped it. That's not the last thing you said.
No, I said, if there are any more questions, I'd love to take a few more.
Right. So basically, not really. So Miss McLean was just stating that she wanted to thank you for coming on and being a host. You can hear me now? We seem to be having some technical difficulty. Right. Miss McLean was saying this to you. She wants to thank you for coming on and for being a good host to Dave and Marissa, even though you're not in Kenya. So they would have got to visit your folks then.
Yeah, so Dave and Marcy are in good hands. We've taken them pretty much around the country. They were in Nairobi, actually in my constituency. They stayed for a few weeks, for a few days in my constituency. And then they went to the western part of the country. They even visited my village, where my dad grew up, where my grandparents grew up as well. Then now they are in Mombasa. I believe they're traveling tonight. And then they're going to be visiting my family in so they're in good hands. But the thing I wanted to say, now that this connects, anyone who's listening to this, please come to Kenya and visit. We'd love to have you. That's the message I pass on.
You hear that, Shaquani? Dr. Wangusi is sending everybody to come to Kenya.
Please come to Kenya.
Janine, but I don't know about you, but I think we may have the plan. That may be a 10-year plan on our bucket list. We may need some time before we can get down there.
Yeah. You might not be able to come for the 2 weeks, but if you're able to come a week, you would love to have Marcy. I think she misses home, but I think she. Yeah. But yeah.
Right, Mr. Wangusi, before you go on, I'm not sure I can ask you this, but I heard you saying my constituency. So does that mean that you're running back?
So sorry, say that again.
I kept hearing you saying your constituency, my constituency. So that means that you're going to run again?
I am thinking about it. I'm thinking.
Okay.
I'm seriously thinking.
Well, that is good. They might need you. The Gen Zs might be able to vote for you.
Who?
The Gen Zs.
I hope the Gen Zs, and then it would be fun if Shaquani and if you came during the campaigns. I think that would be a very good experience.
Why are you trying to get us kidnapped? But if opportunity does arise that we will be able to, I think that Janine and I will both like to participate. And I know many other people, you never know, it may turn out to be a group trip. Because I know experience in Kenya is definitely something that a lot of people will have on their bucket list. But I do want to express our gratitude for having you on tonight. And I think this information was so helpful. And I don't know where we're going to have you back again, but definitely we know in the future we will definitely have you back again.
I just want everybody to know that actually Dr. Wangusi was very ill. I know you can hear him coughing throughout the show and everything. And he's still sick, and he still took the time to come on and explain what is happening in Kenya. I was even glad to see one of the videos when one of the one of the Gen Z say we're speaking in English and you're not understanding, so they started to speak in the language of the Kenyans so that they could understand since you're not understanding.
By the way, in one of those videos, if you remember, there was a video where there was some young girls who were being picked by police and being put.
Yeah.
That's actually my cousin. I in that video. I'd actually not seen it properly, and I was like, "Oh wait, that's Sarah. That's actually one of my cousins." I had been told about the incident. They had tried to arrest her. I didn't actually seen the video, so it was really interesting to see that specific.
So that means the resilience running the family then.
Come again?
So that means the resilience running your guys' family then.
It runs in our blood as Kenyans. This is not. I don't think me specifically, or just Kenyans, are just a very politically. Yes, that's what I think. That's what I think is common. Very assertive politically, especially the young people now who are reading a lot about like their constitutional rights and talking about it and discussing and having public events and town halls about like what does it mean to have constitutional rights? What is this constitution for? What does it mean for us? Right? What does it mean our relationship to our parents? What does it mean in terms of relationship to the government? What should the government be doing that they're not doing now? Right? So once you have people ask those questions, and I think if I believe this is something that's in the piking. This is a constitutional process going on.
Yeah.
You need to pick it up and read it, right? And not just that, but participate in the process of developing it so that it's tailored to your needs. That's what I would advise. And don't wait for the person. I think that sensibility that I'm not going to sit here and wait for Janine to be the one to say something about. I'm not going to sit here and want you to be the one to say something about jobs for young people. I'm not going to wait for the next person. I don't have, I'm just a noisy person, just like every other. You see Kenyans, they talk, they say what it is.
I wish that the Barbadians really got a spirit like them, though. We really need that kind of spirit here, and I think across the Caribbean on the whole right now would do with that kind of spirit that the Kenyans has and the young people. Because most of all, to be quite honest, young people across the Caribbean don't really be interested in that kind of stuff until it really hits home to them personally, one-on-one. But I see Kenyans are taking control of it no matter what, and that is a really good thing. I see that Niger also has a question here for you.
Do you think African countries will nationalize their natural resources? I think not. Depends. Well, natural resources refers to a lot of different things. So you have your rivers, your lakes. The one that is mostly targeted is mining resources. In Kenya, for example, mineral right? So anything that's under is managed. So it really depends what you mean. Water is managed by the government. Water and mineral, and the land obviously is different. So it depends on what you mean by that. If you mean nationalize in the sense of what communist governments were doing in terms of like national banks, commercial. That is not we'll not go into, but in terms of like managing particularly mineral and water resources, I think it's
right. So I see Maxine is saying that she was on her way to Kenya in September, and the day she went to Heathrow, she said she will be back later this year. So I guess your folks can take care of her when she comes.
Absolutely, Maxine. Just let me. I just need a text message to tell me that you're on the way. Let's have you covered.
So that is good.
airport either. So if you're going to be there for a few days, I'll be happy to help you. You know, at least see the parts of basically what I told Marcia. Now I'll say this that we want you to see Kenya from the perspective of us, right? So what I told Marcia, reached out to me. I'll try and make sure that you see Kenya from the perspective, not from the perspective of tourists. And that's a very different. So she's lived in our homes, gone to schools, she's visiting our communities. That's the that makes you. And I think I had the same in Barbados because I was stuck in Barbados for like 2 weeks. I was not even anymore. What it made me understand is that we're not that different. Me and Marcy, me and Janine, I'm like, these Africans are just like me. Maybe we have a different accent, but these are my brothers and sisters. So Nina, please definitely visit. Very, very well.
I saw a comment earlier saying I think we should address it before we go. Someone was saying they can't even find it now that you describe a hellhole and still want us to come to the country. But I guess you can answer that. Every country has issues. Barbados has every country has an issue and people still go to them.
Oh, Kenya. In fact, Marcia was almost. Did she tell you? She'll tell you about that on one of our shows. Every country has issues. We don't hide ours. I'm not saying that it's always going to be a good experience, but it's going to be a little important, right? So you want to actually, maybe you even want to see those sides of the country. Like, it was really meaningful for me to come to when there was a hurricane, because I'm like, wait, everybody gives me postcards of Barbados with like, I'm like, wait, this has real problems.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's important to have those.
Correct. Not just to see the good side of everything.
Yeah. Well, West Africa has a different political history. A lot of coups, like military coups, have happened in that part of the world. Faso, Niger, Mali. I personally don't think that's the way to go. I think when you start having military, I believe in most constitutional democracies. Military belongs in the military barracks, and then the battle. If there's a foreign enemy that threatening our borders, that's the work of the military. The Air Force, the military itself, and the Navy. That's the work of the Navy. But in places like Niger, Mali, you're having this kind of tendency towards authority, military, and in the short term. But how do you remove that cover of leadership when you have that? Things in the short term, it looks like a strong man who is charismatic and dealing with corruption decisively. That's a good thing, but how long does that last? I think democracy is the way to go. Yeah.
Okay. But Dr. Wangusi, it's always good to have you. I think you always go very in depth to what is happening in the country. We think all of us would have learned a lot here tonight, and learn better of what is happening in Kenya more than what we see just on the internet being posted, because sometimes what you see on the internet is not what is actually happening, right? So you were able to go directly in depth to what is happening. We're coming to the end of the show. We hope to have you on again, and we hope that all of us can really meet up again. We met before, and so us to have another face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And please, I'm so excited about my because they ask, are you bringing more? I'm like, I'm going to talk to them and tell them, come. And I think it's a very meaningful. And vice versa. I'm also going to make sure
Pardon me?
If you host them.
Okay, great. Well, it was nice having you on. Shaquani, do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to say it was great to have you again. While we nearly saw each other last time we were in DC, hopefully we can see each when we, I don't know, we both may be flying at the same time. We will sometime soon, or you may be back here in Barbados.
I
But
was
thank you
disappointed. I was so disappointed we were not able to meet next time.
Yeah. It was such a short time in DC. You know, we
Yeah.
were there, we got stuff done, we left. That is how short it was. But we truly appreciated you coming on tonight, and we look forward to hearing you soon. But guys, we're gonna be wrapping up pretty soon. Well, probably like now. But before we go, I just wanted to mention, I wanted everybody to be reminded that on Sunday's show, the program would be co-hosted by Glenn Murray and Maxie McLean. So if you wasn't sure if we were gonna have one, we're definitely having a program on Sunday. So please log on. Again, I just want to apologize for all the technical difficulties we had tonight, but I think we ended up having a really good meeting. And I am truly thankful, and I know Janine is thankful as well, that you all were still able to come on, and we really do appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you all again pretty soon. And have a good night, everyone.
All right, good night, everyone, and thanks Dr. Wangusi and to Stefan again for coming on. We apologize for Dawn not coming on as well. But Dr. Wangusi was sick, and I just want to say that again, and he was still here battling through everything with us. So we do wish you better as well, and good night to everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.